They banned me from every family event, birthdays, holidays, weddings, you name it. My name was scrubbed from the guest lists. My chair was always empty at the table, and my presence was never missed, or at least that's how they wanted me to feel. To them, I was the embarrassment, the black sheep, the one who never quite fit the picture-perfect image they wanted to present to the world. My cousins, with their shiny careers in law and medicine, were treated like royalty. My siblings, who followed the exact path my parents carved out for them, were paraded around like trophies. And me, I was the shadow they refused to acknowledge. I still remember the first time I realized I was deliberately excluded. It was my aunt's 60th birthday party. She was one of my favorite people growing up. I used to spend summers at her house, helping in her garden, eating her famous apple pie. She always promised me, no matter what happens, you'll always be family. So when I opened Instagram that evening and saw post after post of my entire family gathered around her, singing, laughing, clinking glasses, my stomach dropped. Every single one of them was there. Except me. No one had called, no one had texted. Not even a half-hearted excuse. It wasn't just the party. That became the pattern. Christmas dinners. They sat around a long table decorated with gold plates and candles, while I sat alone in my tiny apartment, eating instant noodles with the glow of cheap fairy lights I'd hung myself, scrolling through their smiling photos. Weddings. I'd hear about them after the fact, when old classmates would ask me why I hadn't shown up. What hurt wasn't just being excluded, it was the silence. The way no one acknowledged it. No phone call, no check-in, no explanation. It was as if my existence had been erased. At first, I tried to fight it. I called my mom after missing one Thanksgiving. My voice cracked when I asked, "Why was I invited? Did I do something wrong?" She paused for a long moment before sighing and saying, "It's just easier this way." Easier, that word hit me harder than anything else. Easier for who? For them, certainly. Not for me. For me, it meant loneliness that felt like a punishment. And the worst part, I never understood why. I wasn't perfect, sure. But I wasn't a criminal, I hadn't hurt anyone, I hadn't done anything unforgivable. My only crime was being different. I didn't follow the path they had laid out. I didn't get the stable job they wanted. I chose something riskier, something they didn't respect. And in their eyes, that was enough to exile me. I grew up believing family meant unconditional love, that blood meant belonging. But standing on the outside looking in, I realized blood doesn't guarantee acceptance. It can just as easily be a chain that drags you down. So I stopped begging. I stopped chasing their approval. I stopped waiting for invitations that would never come. What they didn't know was that the isolation they forced me into became my fire. The silence that once crushed me became the very fuel I needed. While they laughed together, celebrated each other, and wrote me off as a failure, I was quietly building something in the shadows. And one day, they would regret every single time they shut the door in my face. The truth is, when you're excluded from everything, you suddenly have a lot of time on your hands. No family dinners, no holiday trips, no group photos to smile in. Just silence. And while silence can be unbearable, it can also be a canvas. At first, I'll admit I wasted that time. I sulked. I cried. I replayed old memories of when I was included, asking myself over and over what I could have done differently. I obsessed over the word my mom used, easier. Was I really that difficult, that unworthy? But there's only so long you can sit in that kind of pain before it either destroys you or transforms you. So I chose transformation. I threw myself into my passion, something my family had always dismissed as a hobby or a phase. I was obsessed with design and building things, not just art on paper, but solving problems with creativity, turning ideas into reality. When I told my parents years ago that I wanted to pursue it, I still remember the look my dad gave me, like I'd just confessed to joining a circus. My mom's response was sharper. "That's not a career. That's how people end up broke." But in my loneliness, I had nothing to lose, so I doubled down. I worked 2 part-time jobs just to scrape by, waiting tables during the day, cleaning offices at night. Every spare dollar went into keeping my dream alive. My tiny apartment became a lab, a workshop, and an office all in one. The kitchen counter held my laptop, secondhand and overheating, where I taught myself through free tutorials. My bedroom floor was covered in sketches, notes, and half-finished prototypes. I'd stay up until 3 a.m., bleary-eyed, forcing myself to code, design, and learn skills that no one believed I needed. I didn't have mentors. I didn't have guidance. I didn't have cheerleaders. I had the internet, stubbornness, and the constant sting of rejection burning in my chest. Every time I wanted to quit, I'd remember scrolling past those smiling family photos online. Them laughing, clinking glasses, celebrating together. And me, invisible. That pain hardened into fuel. If they didn't want me at their table, I'd build my own. But it wasn't easy. There were nights I had to choose between paying rent or buying the materials I needed. Days I went hungry because groceries had to wait until the next paycheck. Times when my body screamed for rest, but my mind refused to stop. People talk about rock bottom like it's a single moment. For me, it was a stretch of years. The kind of years where no one checks on you, no one notices if you're alive, no one calls on your birthday. The years where you wonder if your absence would even matter. And yet, somewhere in that darkness, I found grit I didn't know I had. I learned that when nobody claps for you, you have to clap for yourself. When nobody believes in you, you have to believe double. And slowly, painfully, progress started to show. Small wins at first, a design client who paid me $50, a prototype that finally worked after months of failure, a stranger online who messaged me saying, "This helped me so much." Those tiny sparks lit a fire. I didn't know it yet, but I was building something that would change my entire life. Something that would turn the tables so completely that the very people who banned me from their lives would one day scramble to be part of mine. But back then, all I knew was this: I couldn't stop. I wouldn't stop. Momentum is a strange thing. It doesn't come all at once. It builds, like drops of water collecting until suddenly there's a flood. For months, maybe even years, I was grinding in the shadows. No one saw the long nights, the aching back from sitting on the floor for hours, the panic when bills stacked up. But then, something shifted. It started with a single project. One of my prototypes, a tool I'd been working on for what felt like forever, finally came together. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't perfect. But it worked. And more importantly, it solved a real problem. I shared it online, thinking maybe a handful of people would notice. Instead, it exploded. Comments poured in. Emails followed. Strangers, not my parents, not my siblings, not the people who claimed to know me best, but strangers from across the world told me, "This is brilliant. Where can I buy it?" For the first time in my life, I felt validation not as someone's overlooked child, not as the sibling who didn't get invited, but as me. That was my first sale. $50, just 50, but I swear it felt like I just won the lottery. Because that $50 wasn't money. It was proof. Proof that I wasn't crazy. Proof that my dream was just a hobby. Proof that my parents' voices mocking me had been wrong all along. And once you get that kind of proof, you can't unhear it. I doubled down. Every sale, every client, every positive comment, it all went right back into my work. My crappy laptop eventually got replaced with one that didn't sound like it might explode. My kitchen counter office slowly turned into an actual workspace. I upgraded from sketching on scraps of paper to software I could actually afford. And as the projects grew, so did my reputation. I started getting requests from small businesses, then bigger ones. One email led to another, and before I knew it, I wasn't just scraping by anymore. I was building something real. It was terrifying and exhilarating. Meanwhile, my family still didn't notice. Or maybe they did, but they didn't acknowledge it. They never called to ask how I was doing. They never checked in on my progress. They were still too busy posting photos from family vacations, birthday parties, and Sunday dinners I wasn't invited to. And strangely, that started to feel like freedom. Their silence gave me space. Their rejection gave me time. Their absence forced me to create a family out of the people who truly valued me, clients, collaborators, friends who saw my worth without me having to beg for it. That realization was powerful. But then came the moment that changed everything. One day, an opportunity landed in my inbox. At first, I thought it was spam. A big company had seen my work online. Not just seen it, they were interested. They wanted to talk about licensing one of my designs. I remember reading that email at 2 a.m., my hands shaking, my heart racing so fast I thought I might pass out. Me, the one my family treated like an afterthought, was suddenly in talks with people who had the power to take my little idea to the next level. That deal didn't make me a millionaire, but it did something better. It made me believe in myself on a level I never had before. From that moment on, I stopped thinking small. I stopped playing safe. I stopped wondering if I deserved a seat at the table. Because I wasn't waiting for a seat anymore. I was building my own table. And with each step forward, I could feel it. The gap between who I used to be and who I was becoming. The gap between the invisible family outcast and the unstoppable force they had no idea was rising right under their noses. Success doesn't knock politely. It bursts in like a storm you never saw coming. For me, that storm came faster than I could have imagined. The project that began with scraps of paper and long nights in a freezing apartment had now become a business. Not a side hustle, not a cute little idea, but a real, profitable company. Orders were piling up faster than I could handle, so I had to bring in help. At first, it was one friend, then two, then freelancers, and before long, I was leading a small team. I remember the first time I saw our product displayed on a shelf in an actual store. I stood there for almost 20 minutes just staring. People picked it up, turned it over, checked the price tag, and then they bought it. It was surreal. And yet the best part wasn't the money or the growth or the recognition from strangers. The best part was me. I was changing. I was no longer the quiet, overlooked kid everyone brushed aside. I was standing taller. I spoke with confidence. I carried myself differently. For once in my life, I felt enough. And then, right when I was feeling unstoppable, something happened. My parents called. At first, I thought it was a mistake. They never called me unless they wanted something. But sure enough, their voices were warm, sugar-sweet, like we were the picture of a loving family. "We're so proud of you," my mom said. "We've seen everything you've been doing online." I froze, proud. These were the same people who mocked me, banned me from holidays, made me feel like an outsider in my own family. Now suddenly they were proud. But the truth revealed itself quickly. My dad cleared his throat, hesitating before dropping the real reason for the call. "You know, your cousin is struggling with her business. Maybe you could lend a hand. You've got all this experience now." There it was, not pride, not love, not even interest, just expectation. They wanted me to give. And it didn't stop there. Soon after, my sister called too, not to ask how I was, but to ask if I'd sponsor her idea. You know, just a small investment. It would mean so much. Then came the invitations. Suddenly, I was back on the guest list for family dinners. Suddenly, I was being tagged in Facebook posts with captions like, "So proud of my sibling, look how far they've come." But I knew the truth. They weren't celebrating me. They were circling me like vultures, waiting for scraps. And here's the thing, I could have folded. I could have let the years of longing for their love blind me into giving them everything they wanted. But I didn't. Because success had taught me something. Real family isn't about blood. It's about loyalty. It's about showing up when it matters. And they hadn't, not once. So when they tried to worm their way back in, I didn't slam the door. I didn't yell. I didn't even explain. I smiled. I nodded. I said, "I'll think about it." And then I walked away. Because the real revenge wasn't anger. The real revenge was living the life they told me I'd never have. The higher I climbed, the smaller their world looked. And the more they reached out, the more obvious it became. They weren't chasing me. They were chasing what I had built. But I wasn't building it for them. I was building it for me. And I wasn't done yet. There comes a moment in every underdog's story when the tables turn so completely that the people who once had all the power are left stunned, scrambling to catch up. For me, that moment didn't happen in silence. It happened on a stage. Months after those awkward family phone calls, I was invited to give a keynote speech at a major industry conference. It wasn't just some side event, it was the event. Thousands of people in the audience, cameras everywhere, news outlets covering it. I walked onto that stage, lights beaming down on me, microphone in hand, and for the first time in my life, all eyes were on me. I talked about my journey, the nights of eating cheap noodles, the rejections, the failures, the loneliness. I didn't name names, but every word was a mirror to the family who had once told me I wasn't good enough. I could see them in my mind, sitting around their dinner table, never realizing the person they excluded was carving a new world without them. When I finished, the applause shook the walls. Reporters crowded me afterward, shaking my hand, asking for quotes. That same night, my inbox flooded with opportunities, partnerships, investors, collaborations. And then, the cherry on top, a message from my cousin, the same cousin whose birthday party I wasn't invited to years ago. "Wow," the message read. "You've really made it big. We're so proud of you. Can't wait to see you at the next family gathering." I stared at that message for a long time, and then I laughed, not bitterly, genuinely, because I finally understood. It didn't matter if they showed up now. It didn't matter if they called me, texted me, tagged me in posts. The validation I once craved so badly didn't mean a thing anymore. Because I had built a life where their approval wasn't the currency. I didn't need them to clap for me. The world was already clapping loud enough. And the irony, the same people who banned me from family events now used my name as bragging rights. They introduced me as our successful one. They wanted to bask in a glow they once tried to snuff out. But deep down, I knew the truth, and so did they. They hadn't believed in me. They hadn't supported me. They hadn't been there. And that absence, that silence, that rejection, it was the greatest gift they ever gave me. Because without it, I might never have found the fire to prove them wrong. So when I walked off that stage, into a future brighter than I'd ever imagined, I didn't carry bitterness. I carried freedom. And every time I see them now, smiling, pretending they never shut me out, I smile back. Because in the end, the best revenge wasn't payback. The best revenge was becoming someone they could never again afford to ignore.